Hello everyone, my name is Genji Nakano, and today my presentation will be on should the federal government create more stringent laws for digital privacy and data security. More stringent than what's currently out there, as far as on both the national level and what's going on with the states as well. Because right now states are doing a lot of pushback, and they haven't come to an agreement across the board, right? Different states have different values, different things they look out for, different interests, so they don't have the same requirements per state. So my presentation is going to be on should the federal government have more stringent laws on digital privacy and data security for companies. So in this presentation, I'm going to argue for that they should have more power. At least to establish some sort of baseline federal law, and then from there, let the individual states create additional layers if they wanted to. One of the things that I found alarming when I was doing some research for this presentation was the lack of fines as far as data security and digital privacy. There's really not much negative impact that companies can do. Now, before I kind of go over my arguments, when I started looking back at other technologies that occurred, I kind of wanted to think back to what happened to laws that the society and the government had to deal with at that point in time. And one of the first things that came to my mind was the car or automobile industry, right? The cars, and how it advanced, and how how laws were created over time versus what happened right away. When cars were first created, not many individuals or society, government knew exactly what to do or what kind of laws to create. There weren't even roads or infrastructure, right? To establish. There was no individual highway laws versus city laws versus urban laws on how to drive a vehicle. Now imagine if you got in a car accident, whose fault would it be back then? Is it the car manufacturer's fault? Or is it the individual's fault? Who provided the education to drive the vehicle? And then another scenario is, let's imagine that cars were, because back then you hit someone at 15, 25 miles per hour, you probably did some major damage, if not kill someone with that big machinery. And cars are definitely different now. But what if back then laws were established where you couldn't make cars go past 25 miles per hour? Would that have stifled innovation for making advanced cars? So you got to be cautious with the laws that you have out there, because certainly they were when they were creating laws. Because I always imagine why are our vehicles have the speed limit 65 at most places, but our cars go at 120 miles per hour? Why is that possible? So that's, and if someone, another thought is, if someone got in an accident at 120 miles per hour, whose fault is that? Is that the vehicle's fault, or is that the driver's fault, right? And then with that, we have the education. You have to go to school to get a general license, but then once you get your license for each individual vehicle out there, you get a little manual they stick in the dashboard, but you really don't know what's being used or how, the ins and outs. You may know how to drive, but just the basics. So with digital privacy and data security, the laws are too lax, and they just need to be a little bit more stringent, at least as far as baseline. Just like emissions, California, I live in California, and our emissions are a little bit higher than everyone else, but to the benefit of the environment, if the emission standards raised across the nation as well, because some businesses who want to do business in California had to comply to the emissions test. Now, as far as the laws that you want to have, do you want to have it as the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation? With that particular law, you're required to inform the companies are required to inform users about their policies. they had to get explicit information before collecting such personal information. Now, for people who are like the consumer, that's a good thing. For businesses, they may not like that particular information because they might think that, hey, just like the book stated, we're giving away these products for free. You know, some of their income are from these lists that they create, for marketing lists, for whatever reason, and they get their income from that, usually for advertising. What if we took away that right for those individuals? Now, what I say to that, to counter that, and this is the reason why I'm for a national federal law, is that the big tech companies who wanted to continue doing business in Europe complied, right? So they definitely complied to the law if they wanted to do business here. Now I'll give you an example of why I needed, I say, some baseline and maybe, you know, have some states have a little bit of flexibility. Now, in 2020, like I said, I live in California. In 2020, California just passed a law that will come into effect January 1st, 2020, the California Consumer Protection Privacy Act, or California Consumer Privacy Act. Now, just like the GDPR with Europe, you have to have adequate security to take care of your data. You got to inform the consumer regarding that you're going to collect the data. But here's some little extra things that are thrown on top of that, just because California wants to, ensure consumer protection rights. One thing that that you're allowed to do is you're allowed to request the data that's been collected about you. So whatever data you have on me, let me know. So you're allowed to request that that will soon come into effect under our law. The other thing that we're going to be allowed to do is we're going to be allowed to see what data our information has been sold to other companies and how is it being used, right? So with that could impact businesses who don't want to disclose that information, especially if it's sensitive information. So with another thing that's added on top of that is that, let's say you don't like the company that your information is being dealt with, you actually have the ability to stop the company from selling the data to that particular company, or to all companies in general. Now, with California being one of 50 states, as a business, you could then choose to decide whether you want to do business here or not. Now, most likely you probably want to comply to a big state like California, but some, to be honest, will not. Now, I think back, I did either through the book or through some research, they had an example of the wine industry when it first came out online. They didn't know how to handle the wine industry, so what they did was states wanted to protect their own wine industry. So there was a individual in the beginning, just like kind of today with digital privacy laws. Every state had their own individual laws. However, they tailored their individual laws to protect their own businesses. So in that particular instance, they would make, for example, if you were an out-of-state winery, you couldn't sell in their state unless you sold online, unless you grew the wines in your state. So that discounted a lot of people selling wines to a particular state. However, that state could still sell wines to the other states, right? So to create a little balance. Now, with the Digital Privacy Act, I mean, we're the consumers, so it's consumers versus business. But that does bring into question, right? If your business is impacted, maybe that more businesses go to your state, so that could actually impact me as a, consumer or individual living in California. So some states may prefer to have that. Some states may want to move to those states because they believe, hey, these people will definitely prefer these companies that take care of their digital privacy the right way, or to an extreme. I wouldn't say the right way, but to an extreme that I like. Then I would just want to stick to doing business through there. Now, the reason why we need to have some kind of baseline is because, and make it stringent. That's why I put that category of stringent in there, is because in 2020 also that could undermine this particular law in California, and also others. There's a law in New York that's similar to the GDPR that's going to pass, that's going to pass next year. Excuse me. Is that these laws can be passed by other, businesses who lobby for different interests, right? Centers for different interests. So there's a couple laws out there that would actually, if passed, would set a, baseline, just like I requested, but not, or just like I'm arguing for, but just not as stringent and tailored towards the business. So it would limit the capabilities that businesses have. The one other thing that I also liked about the California law, just before I move on, is the opt-out clause that they have. You can't have a false choice, meaning that you have to have, it's got to be very clear, right? So they can't kind of trick you, and you got to know. And then the final thing that's important with this law, and you think about it, companies can't refuse you as a customer or refuse your service to you if you deny that you don't want your data to be sold. So you're informed of the information being collected, but then you said, hey, I don't want my data to be sold. You check that box, they're not going to be able to decline you. So again, how would states differ on that? So I particularly, if I don't want to have a whole data privacy where they're as super strict as one particular state's interests and goals, because I do understand that other states have different benefits. Now, the one thing that I talked about in the beginning a little bit was about data protection as well, data privacy as well, is because, or data security protection as well, laws regarding that, is because I was doing some research, and this kind of ties in where our information is getting out there, and then all these data breaches. Well, I was reading about that this is soon causing what's called data breach fatigue. People are just hearing about so many data breaches. We're seeing the emails, hey, your data is being compromised. People are just kind of like, they see it, they're aware of it, and they're the ones ultimately who have to take the responsibility to do action on it. As far as the businesses themselves, they're not really getting impacted a whole lot. The one thing I didn't like is when I got my Equifax data breach, I was part of that. They notified me, and then they offered me like 2 years of whatever service, and it wasn't until the government, protection service. So they're the people who monitor credit, yet they got broken into and then affected millions of people's credit, and it was only going to monitor for 2 years for free. It wasn't until the government was able to step in and say, hey, no, you can't do that, you got to extend that. So the government does have the ability to put some stringent laws onto the books for all companies. One thing that I was thinking about, especially when the professor had the example of the social engineering license, was these database administrators. They have if you think about it, they have a very important role at a company, because they're handling so much of important secure data that they should be very well versed in controlling the data and also administering the data, and see what gets out, what gets in, and also seeing who has access to the data, right? 3 main common reasons why the data gets breached is human error, computer error, or malicious intent. And if you could, computer error is going to happen, but then you can see where it happened. And if human error, you could kind of see who did it and fix the problem, correct the issue. If it's malicious intent by an employee, then if you have the correct access stuff, then you can trace it. If it's a malicious intent by a hacker, then if you have the measures to stop it, then built in, or nationwide as best practices, then you shouldn't be, you should be held accountable if you didn't follow the directions. So with database administrators, should they be, credentialed or whatnot? No, but I think they should have some sort of capability to administer these databases. But again, they should also have some federal laws nationwide for data, security with data, that number one protects the data in a way that's will help stop all these data breaches, and also fines that will help these companies stop it if the way they got the data was based off of negligence or based off of errors that could have been controlled. Now, if it is based off of other factors such as malicious hackers that were just really good, which I'm sure definitely exists, obviously, then we can learn from those mistakes and make it known and don't be scared to publish those results. I could definitely go on about the subject for a couple more minutes, but I see that I'm out of time. So I thank you for your time, for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a good rest of the semester. Have a good day. Thank you.